Hey there, history buffs.
Hmm.
I know you guys love kings and queens,
Yeah.
those larger-than-life figures who really shaped history.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so today, we're taking our shared passion for royalty back in time to ancient Greece,
Ooh,
to Athens.
okay.
And you might be thinking, wait a second, wasn't Athens all about democracy?
Right.
And you'd be absolutely right.
Mm.
But before it became the birthplace of democracy, Athens had its own royal lineage,
Uh-huh.
full of drama and legendary figures.
It's a really fascinating period, and I think it's full of twists and turns that ultimately really laid the foundation for the political systems that we know today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And think about it this way. Even though Athens eventually moved away from monarchy, understanding its early rulers really helps us grasp how those power dynamics shifted
Right.
and how concepts like citizenship and governance evolved.
Yeah, it's like looking at the roots of a tree to see how it grew so strong.
Perfect analogy.
Mhm.
And speaking of roots, ancient Greece wasn't a unified empire
Right.
like
Yeah.
Rome.
It wasn't.
It was a patchwork of independent city-states, each with its own identity and way of life.
Yeah, that's right. And that structure was really influenced by Greece's geography.
Yeah,
Mountains, islands, harbors galore.
it's true.
Not exactly an easy place to create a sprawling empire.
You hit the nail on the head that terrain made it so difficult to conquer and control vast territories.
Right.
So these city-states emerged naturally as self-governing entities,
Mm-hmm.
each fiercely independent and often competing with each other for power and resources.
Yeah, it's really different than the feudal states of China
Oh, yeah.
during the spring and autumn period,
Sure.
which grew through constant conflict and consolidation.
It's amazing how geography can shape the destiny of civilizations.
It really is, yeah.
So we have these independent city-states, and within them, a concept we're all familiar with starts to take root, politics. It's no coincidence that the word politics comes from the Greek word politica,
Uh-huh.
which meant the affairs of the city-state.
It all comes back around.
It does.
And of course, one of the most prominent city-states
Yeah.
was Athens, a city just steeped in myths and legends, and a place where history and mythology just kind of blur.
Absolutely. We've all heard tales of Theseus,
Yeah.
the Athenian hero who slays the Minotaur,
Right.
liberating Athens from King Menos.
These stories offer a glimpse into the values and beliefs that shaped early Athenian society.
For sure, they were grappling with those big questions.
Oh, yeah.
What is good leadership? What sacrifices are necessary for the good of the people?
Who has the power?
What's deep stuff?
Yes.
So let's talk about those early Athenian rulers.
Okay.
Where do we even begin?
Well, legend tells us that Athens was founded by a pretty unique figure,
Okay.
Cecrops,
Right.
who was said to be half man, half serpent.
Half serpent. That's a rule you don't want to cross.
I know, right?
It makes you wonder how much of these early tales are rooted in fact and how much is embellished.
Right. It's a blend of history and mythology. But what's important is that these stories shaped the Athenian psyche, their understanding of their past and their place in the world.
Okay.
And as we move from mythical figures to more historical rulers, we see this fascinating shift taking place.
Okay, so let's talk about that shift. How did Athens transition from these legendary kings to the system of governance that would eventually lead to democracy?
One really pivotal moment, and a story that I think speaks volumes about Athenian ideals, involves King Kodrus.
Kodrus.
Yes,
There's a name that resonates with a sense of duty and sacrifice.
it does.
So what's his story?
So picture this. Athens is under threat from Dorian invaders,
Okay.
and an oracle delivers a chilling prophecy.
Uh-huh.
The Dorians will only be victorious if they don't kill the Athenian king.
So the fate of Athens hinges on the life of its king.
Talk about pressure.
I know. What did Kodrus do?
In an act of incredible selflessness, Kodrus disguised himself as a peasant and deliberately provoked the Dorians, ensuring his own death to save his city.
Wow. Talk about going above and beyond the call of duty.
I know, it's incredible, right? His sacrifice had a profound impact on the Athenians.
that?
They were so moved by his selfless act that they decided no one could ever be worthy of replacing him as king.
Oh, wow.
So they abolished the monarchy altogether. It's incredible to think that this occurred around 1068 BCE, just a couple of decades before the Zhou dynasty was established in China.
So at a time when China was embracing centralized power under a dynasty, Athens was taking a radical step away from monarchy.
Exactly. And this decision set Athens on a path that would fundamentally shape its political and cultural landscape, ultimately influencing the development of democracy. But of course, abolishing the monarchy didn't mean Athens suddenly became a democracy overnight.
Right.
There were several steps and power struggles along the way.
Oh, so the plot thickens.
Yes, it does.
What happened next in this Athenian power play? Who filled the void left by the monarchy?
Well, next we have the archons, essentially rulers who initially held power for life, but later had their terms limited.
Okay.
The first archon was King Kodrus' own grandson.
So a bit of a compromise, moving away from a hereditary monarchy, but not completely abandoning the idea of lineage and established power.
Right.
But did this new system work?
Not entirely.
Oh.
While the abolition of the monarchy was a bold move, it didn't fully address the social and political tensions brewing within Athenian society.
Gotcha.
The common people had hoped for more equality and a greater say in how they were governed, but power remained largely in the hands of the nobility.
Oh, so the seeds of discontent were already being sown.
They were.
Were there any specific events that highlighted this growing rift between the aristocracy and the common people?
Oh, there were a couple of incidents that really exposed just how fragile the system was.
Okay.
One involved a merchant named Solon, who in 632 BCE attempted a coup d'etat.
Wow.
He wanted to seize power from the aristocratic rulers, but failed miserably.
So Solon's failed coup kind of exposed the cracks in the system.
It did.
It's almost like Athenian society was a pot simmering on the stove, and Solon just turned up the heat.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, and the heat just kept rising just a decade later. In 621 BCE, an Athenian archon named Draco codified Athenian law.
Draco?
Yes. His name, as you might have guessed, is forever linked with the word draconian.
Ah, Draco. His laws were notoriously harsh, right?
They were.
Punishments that would make anyone think twice.
Exactly. Draco's laws were known for their extreme severity. Even minor offenses were met with brutal punishments, often death.
Really?
Imagine a legal system where stealing a loaf of bread could result in execution.
That's intense.
I know it's hard to believe such a system could last.
It is. Surely the Athenian people pushed back against these draconian measures.
They did, and thankfully change was on the horizon.
Okay.
Enters Solon, an Athenian statesman who was appointed archon in 594 BCE.
Okay.
He's often hailed as this wise reformer, someone who genuinely understood the needs of the people and the challenges facing Athenian society.
Solon, the voice of reason amidst chaos.
Exactly.
So what did he do to address this discontent?
Well, Solon implemented a series of really groundbreaking reforms that were aimed at easing that economic hardship and creating a more balanced political landscape.
Okay.
One of his most significant moves was abolishing debt slavery.
Debt slavery. So people were essentially forced into servitude to pay off their debts.
Right. It sounds awful, doesn't it?
It does.
And it trapped so many Athenians in a cycle of poverty and despair.
Wow.
Solon recognized the injustice of this system and just abolished it outright.
Good for him.
He also introduced measures to encourage trade, and he standardized weights and measures and even reformed the currency system.
Wow. He was tackling issues on multiple fronts.
He was.
Trying to create a more stable and just society.
Yeah.
So what about political reforms? Did Solon make any changes to give the common people a greater voice?
He did. He recognized that the existing system, which heavily favored the aristocracy, was a recipe for unrest. So he divided Athenian citizens into 4 classes based on their wealth.
Okay, so wealth still played a role, but how did this new system change things?
Well, it meant that even though wealthier citizens still held more influence, those in the lower classes could now participate in government and hold certain positions.
Wow.
For the first time, ordinary Athenians had a say in how they were governed.
That's amazing.
Solon also granted citizenship to foreign craftsmen, recognizing their value to Athenian society.
So Solon's laying the groundwork for a more inclusive system.
Yes.
One that recognized the contributions of a wider range of people.
Exactly.
It's a huge step away from those rigid aristocratic systems that were so prevalent at the time.
It was a monumental shift, but it's important to remember that Solon wasn't trying to establish a democracy in the way we understand it today.
Right.
His reforms were about creating a more balanced and just system within the existing framework.
Right. It was evolution, not revolution.
Exactly.
But did Solon's reforms solve all of Athens' problems? Did they usher in an era of peace and prosperity?
Unfortunately, no. While Solon's reforms were significant and they laid the foundation for later democratic developments, they didn't completely eradicate those tensions within Athenian society.
Got it.
Inequality persisted, and that struggle for power continued.
So the drama continues.
It does.
Who stepped onto the Athenian stage next? who inherited this web of social and political dynamics.
This is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The next chapter in our Athenian saga involves a figure who, on the surface, seems like the antithesis of everything Solon stood for.
Okay.
Pisistratus the tyrant.
Pisistratus the tyrant.
Yes.
Now, tyrant doesn't exactly evoke images of a benevolent ruler.
No, it doesn't.
What was he like?
Well, it's important to remember that the word tyrant had a slightly different meaning in ancient Greece.
Okay.
It wasn't necessarily a negative term.
Okay.
It referred to someone who seized power unconstitutionally,
Uh-huh.
often with the support of the people.
Okay.
They weren't always cruel or oppressive.
For more like a powerful leader who played by his own rules. And Pisistratus fit this description.
He did. Pisistratus came to power in the 6th century BCE, capitalizing on the very tensions that Solon had tried to address.
Oh, wow.
He presented himself as a champion of the common people, promising to protect their interests against the aristocracy.
So he was a bit of a populist, appealing to the masses to gain power.
He was very much a populist.
It seems like a tactic that's still in use today.
Oh, absolutely.
So was Pisistratus successful?
He was very successful.
Okay.
He managed to seize power not once, but 3 times.
3 times.
3 times.
This guy was persistent.
He was.
But if he was a tyrant, how did he maintain his grip on power? Did he rule with an iron fist?
Well, that's the fascinating thing about Pisistratus.
Okay.
Despite seizing power unconstitutionally, he implemented policies that actually benefited the common people.
Oh, really?
He redistributed land,
Okay.
invested in public works projects, and promoted Athenian culture and arts.
Wow.
He even played a key role in preserving Homer's epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey.
So he was a despot who also made positive contributions to society.
Yes, he was a bit of a contradiction.
That's wild.
It is, and that's what makes Pisistratus such an intriguing figure.
For sure.
He understood that to maintain power, he needed the support of the people.
Mm-hmm.
His reign, though controversial, marked a period of relative peace and prosperity for Athens.
So he was a shrewd politician.
Yes.
A man of contradictions who left a complex legacy.
He did.
How does he fit into this larger narrative of Athens' journey toward democracy?
That's a great question, and it brings us to the next key figure in our Athenian adventure, Cleisthenes.
Cleisthenes, now there's a name synonymous with Athenian democracy.
It is.
He's the one who finally brought it all together, right?
He is often considered the father of Athenian democracy, and for good reason, but it's important to understand that Cleisthenes didn't operate in a vacuum.
Okay.
He built upon the foundation laid by those who came before him, including, in some ways, even Pisistratus.
So even a tyrant can inadvertently contribute to the development of democracy.
It seems that way.
History is full of surprises.
It is.
So what exactly did Cleisthenes do to earn his title as the father of Athenian democracy?
Cleisthenes was all about empowering the people
Okay.
and diminishing the influence of the aristocracy.
Uh-huh.
He completely reorganized Athenian society,
Okay.
breaking down the traditional tribal divisions that had long favored the elite.
So he was shaking things up,
He was.
challenging the old power structures.
Yes.
So how did he go about redistributing power?
Well, he established a council of 500,
Okay.
chosen by lot from all citizens, regardless of their social standing or wealth.
Chosen by lot. That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's like the Athenian version of drawing names out of a hat.
It was a radical concept for the time, a way to ensure that all citizens had an equal chance of participating in government.
Wow.
It was a direct challenge to the idea that only those born into privilege had a right to rule.
This Council of 500, was it like a governing body? What were they responsible for?
Think of them as a sort of steering committee for Athenian society.
Okay.
They were responsible for proposing laws, overseeing day-to-day affairs, and setting the agenda for the assembly.
And the assembly, that's where all citizens could gather and participate directly in decision-making, right?
Exactly. It was the heart of Athenian democracy.
Wow.
Any citizen could attend, speak their mind, and vote on important matters.
That's pretty cool.
It was a truly remarkable system for its time, a testament to the Athenian belief in the power of collective decision-making.
It's mind-blowing to think that this system, conceived over 2,500 years ago, laid the groundwork for the democracies we know today.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It is. But Cleisthenes didn't stop there, did he? He also introduced the practice of ostracism, didn't he?
He did, and it was another brilliant move to safeguard against tyranny and ensure that no one individual could become too powerful.
Ostracism, and it's a word that still carries weight today.
It does.
Often used to describe someone who's been excluded or shunned.
Right.
But what did it mean in ancient Athens?
It was essentially a form of exile.
Okay.
A way for the Athenian people to remove someone from the city if they were deemed a threat to the democracy.
So if someone became too ambitious, too power-hungry, the people could vote to kick them out.
They could.
Talk about checks and balances.
Exactly. It was a way to prevent anyone from becoming too powerful, too much like a tyrant.
Wow.
Each year, the assembly would vote on whether to hold an ostracism. If they decided to proceed, citizens would write the name of the person they wanted ostracized on a piece of broken pottery.
On pottery?
Yes, it was called an ostracon.
So they literally wrote names on broken pottery.
They did.
That's where we get the term ostracized.
Yeah,
I never knew that.
The person with the most votes would then be banished from Athens for a period of 10 years.
Wow.
It was a powerful tool to protect that fragile democracy from individuals who might seek to undermine it.
Cleisthenes was a true visionary. His reforms, building upon the foundation laid by Solon and others, truly marked a turning point in Athenian history, ushering in an era of unprecedented citizen participation and laying the groundwork for the concept of democracy as we know it.
He's a remarkable figure.
Now let's take a step back and compare Athens to what was happening in China during this same period. While Athens was experimenting with democracy, China was consolidating power under a monarchy.
Right.
Why do you think their paths diverged so dramatically?
That's a great question. I think there are several factors at play. Athens, with its reliance on trade and its unique geography, fostered a spirit of independence and a need for compromise among its citizens. China, on the other hand, with its vast territory and agricultural economy, prioritized stability and centralized control.
So their economic and geographical realities shaped their political destinies.
To a large extent, yes. And their different approaches to governance had a lasting impact on their respective civilizations. But one thing that's really fascinating is that even though Athens ultimately became a democracy, the legacy of its early rulers, those kings and tyrants played a significant role in shaping European history and culture.
That's a really interesting point.
It is.
How so? What influence did these early Athenian rulers have on the wider world?
Well, for one thing, the ideas that took root in Athens, ideas about citizenship, the rule of law, the balance of power, these didn't stay confined to the Greek world. They had a profound and lasting impact on the development of political thought throughout Europe.
So even though Athens moved away from monarchy, its early rulers helped plant the seeds for ideas that would shape the political landscape of Europe.
Exactly.
It's amazing how interconnected history is.
It really is.
Can you give us some specific examples of how this Athenian legacy played out in European history?
Absolutely. Let's consider the Roman Republic, which later transformed into the Roman Empire.
It was heavily influenced by Greek ideas, including those from Athens.
Gotcha.
The concept of a Senate, a body of representatives who debated and made laws, has clear parallels with the Athenian assembly.
So we can see the Athenian influence in the very structure of Roman governance.
Exactly. And of course, the Roman Empire played a pivotal role in shaping the political and cultural landscape of Europe for centuries. Its legal system, its military organization, its art and architecture, all of these elements were infused with ideas that had originated in ancient Greece, including those that had taken root in Athens.
So we can draw a line from the Athenian assembly to the Roman Senate and beyond.
Exactly.
It's fascinating to think that the echoes of those early Athenian rulers can be heard in the halls of power across Europe.
I know, it's incredible.
It is.
And the influence doesn't stop there during the Renaissance. There was a renewed interest in classical Greek and Roman thought.
This led to a re-examination of ideas about governance and the relationship between rulers and the rulers.
So the seeds of democracy, sown in ancient Athens, continue to sprout throughout history. Influencing the development of political systems in Europe and eventually around the world.
Exactly. The Athenian experiment, despite its limitations, continues to inspire us to strive for more just and inclusive forms of governance.
Welcome back to our Athenian adventure. We've journeyed from those mythical kings to, like, groundbreaking reformers. And we even encountered a tyrant who, you know, in his own way, contributed to the evolution of Athenian society.
It's been quite a ride, hasn't it, through the twists and turns of Athenian history?
It really has, and I'm struck by how much we can learn from these ancient Athenians. Even though their world seems so different from our own.
I agree. Their struggles with power, Their innovations in governance, their triumphs and their failures, it all offers valuable insights into like the human quest for a just and equitable society.
Now, I want to circle back to our listeners who are really captivated by royal history.
Yep.
While this deep dive hasn't focused on traditional kings and queens,
Right.
it has explored the evolution of power and leadership in a way that's really relevant to understanding European history and culture.
I completely agree. Even though Athens ultimately embraced democracy, its journey toward that system of governance was really intertwined with like the legacy of its early rulers, those kings and tyrants who shaped Athenian society and kind of set the stage for all these later developments.
So even though those early Athenian rulers weren't monarchs in the traditional sense, their actions and decisions had a ripple effect
Right.
that extended far beyond the walls of Athens.
Exactly. The ideas that took root in ancient Athens, ideas about citizenship, the rule of law, and the balance of power, these ideas didn't stay confined to the Greek world. They spread throughout Europe, influencing the development of political thought and shaping the trajectory of monarchies and other forms of government.
It's fascinating to think that the echoes of those early Athenian rulers can be heard in the halls of power across Europe.
I know.
Can you give us some specific examples of how this Athenian legacy played out in European history?
Absolutely. Let's consider the Roman Republic,
Okay.
which later transformed into the Roman Empire.
Right.
It was heavily influenced by Greek ideas, including those from Athens.
Uh-huh.
The concept of a senate,
Okay.
a body of representatives who debated and made laws,
Uh-huh.
has clear parallels with the Athenian assembly.
So we can see the Athenian influence in the very structure of Roman governance.
Exactly. And of course, the Roman Empire played a pivotal role in shaping the political and cultural landscape of Europe for centuries.
Right.
Its legal system, its military organization, its art and architecture, all of these elements were infused with ideas that had originated in ancient Greece, including those that had taken root in Athens.
It's amazing how interconnected history is. It's like a tapestry,
It is.
woven with threads from different cultures and time periods, all contributing to this rich and complex pattern we see today.
It's a beautiful analogy.
And this interconnectedness is especially evident during the Renaissance,
Oh,
a period marked by a renewed interest in classical Greek and Roman thought.
right.
Thinkers and artists rediscovered the works of Athenian philosophers, playwrights, and historians.
Uh-huh.
And these rediscoveries fueled a re-examination of ideas about governance and the relationship between rulers and the ruled.
It's incredible.
So the seeds of democracy sown in ancient Athens continue to sprout throughout history, influencing the development of political systems in Europe and eventually around the world. It's a testament to the enduring power of ideas.
It truly is. The Athenian experiment, despite its limitations, continues to inspire us to strive for more just and inclusive forms of governance.
We've explored the rise and fall of Athenian rulers,
Yes.
the struggles for power, the
Right.
innovations in governance, and the enduring legacy of their ideas.
Right.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into ancient Athens, what are some key takeaways for our listeners,
Okay.
especially for those fascinated by the dynamics of power and leadership?
I think one of the most important lessons from the Athenian experience is that political systems are constantly evolving, shaped by the interplay of social, economic, and cultural forces.
So there's no one-size-fits-all solution to governance.
Yeah.
Each society has to find its own path, its own way to balance the needs of the individual with the needs of the collective.
Exactly. And the Athenian experiment, with its successes and failures, offers valuable insights into the complexities of this balancing act.
Another key takeaway, I think, is that even in systems that we might consider flawed or incomplete,
Right.
there can be valuable lessons to be learned.
For sure.
The Athenian democracy, while groundbreaking for its time, was limited in its inclusivity.
Right.
Women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded from political participation.
Yeah.
But even with those limitations, the Athenian model provided a framework for later generations to build upon, to expand the concept of democracy, to encompass a wider range of voices and perspectives.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that the pursuit of a just and equitable society is an ongoing process, a journey that requires constant adaptation, innovation, and a willingness to learn from both the successes and failures of the past.
It's fitting that we end our deep dive with a question that encourages our listeners to continue exploring these ideas.
Okay.
We've seen how different Athens and China were in their approaches to governance.
Right.
Athens embraced a form of democracy, while China centralized power under monarchy.
Right.
Considering these divergent paths, what lessons can we draw from their experiences about the diverse ways societies can organize themselves and address issues of power and equality?
That's a great question, and one that I hope will spark further reflection and discussion for our listeners. It highlights the fact that there's no single right way to govern a society. Different cultures, different geographies, and historical circumstances can lead to very different solutions. The key is to be open to learning from a variety of perspectives, to critically examine the strengths and weaknesses of different systems, and to constantly strive for more just and equitable forms of governance.
Well, there you have it, folks. We've journeyed through the myths and legends, the power struggles and reforms, the triumphs and failures of ancient Athens.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. We've explored the legacy of its rulers and witnessed the birth of democracy, a system of governance that continues to shape our world today. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into Athenian history, and we encourage you to continue pondering the question we've posed. What can we learn from the past as we navigate the complexities of power and leadership in our own time? Thanks for joining us.